live Q&A. With me, I have Joel. Hi, Joel. Everything okay?
Hey, all good.
Good, good. Thanks for joining in. Usually we do these live Q&As every Thursday. This week we're doing it on Tuesday, simply because this Thursday we have a guest, so we have an extra session. The special guest for this Thursday will be Aurelio from the WP Umbrella. So we'll be discussing a lot of things in regards to agencies, managing multiple websites, and similar stuff. Thanks for joining us, whoever's watching live. As always, you can ask us any questions during the live sessions. If you are watching a recorded session, simply feel free to send us your emails at questions@melapress.com and we'll get back to you as soon as possible. Don't forget, please, to like and subscribe the channel so you get notified of future events. In the past, we've discussed a bit, basically here we talk a lot about WordPress and stuff. And today, we'll be talking a bit about e-commerce, like keeping your e-commerce store, securing it and keeping it secure, basically. It's very important, of course, because as a store owner, you'll have customer data, you'll be dealing with financial transactions. You have other things, right, Joe, like compliance and stuff like that, correct? That you need
Yeah,
to,
exactly. Especially if if you're servicing EU clients, sorry, you have GDPR that you need to comply with.
The US, we have PCI-DSS there. Every
Exactly.
different country's legislation have different ones.
Exactly. And there's also PCI-DSS, as you very well mentioned. And California, they have their own data protection laws.
Yes, I thought CPAA or something like that.
Yeah, CCPA, I think.
Yes.
And basically failing to comply with any of these laws or standards can have negative repercussions.
Correct. I think it's also very important, not just for negative repercussions, but also, first of all, if you want a successful store for the for your store, for your business, for your reputation as a business, and also for the customers, like you want, of course, to have a successful business and to flourish and everyone to be happy. We're also discussing e-commerce solutions and security because it's like it matters to us as well, because we develop a number of plugins that are used by e-commerce store owners. In fact, very often we don't have exact numbers, but it's very often we see WooCommerce, like our plugins installed alongside WooCommerce or easy digital downloads. Basically, we have plugins which we'll be mentioning during this session, basically at different stages that can be used, of course, to enhance the security of your store, like WP Activity Log, which is a logging platform, WP2FA, like an authentication and 2FA solution for WordPress, Melapress login security for login and password security, and also Melapress role editor to edit rows. So from where do we start? Let's assume, Joel, you're setting up an e-commerce store. You haven't started yet. Like, what should be the first steps? Like you don't even have a website. You don't even have hosting. From where do we start? From where do you recommend we start?
Okay, so first of all, we should start from the hosting. We need to make sure that the hosting provider that we choose is able to service our security requirements. There isn't one service provider that is better than the rest. Obviously, there are a number of them that are sort of high tier, that are very well known, no need to mention names. But do take the time to do your sort of research. And one thing that I would suggest is to basically try to trial their help desk. Because if something happens, you're going to need to get in touch very, very quickly. So do try to send them an email, see how fast they respond, how they are able to help you, have some questions perhaps, to make sure that they are responsive as much as possible.
Exactly, yeah. And like this is not specifically for e-commerce in general, like everything else. Before going for a post, read a bit of reviews, check their uptime, and stuff like that, and see what basically fits your requirements. I know there are different, especially nowadays with e-commerce, different countries have different legislations, different laws, different compliance requirements. So there might, I'm not aware of any particular ones, but some of them might have specific privacy policies or specific rules that like might apply more to the country where you're doing. So I think that's definitely doing a bit of homework. So once you find your web host, I think obviously, and you set up WordPress, then you need to get SSL/TLS, like, so you have the HTTPS. So all the communication between the browser of your website visitors and your web store is basically encrypted. And then of course it's about, you need to choose a reliable e-commerce plugin. I think the most popular are WooCommerce and Easy Digital Downloads. If I'm mistaken, there are a few other ones, Joel, but I think
those are the most popular.
Yes. It's important to point out that these solutions usually are similar to WordPress, as in like you get a basic framework which you can do so much with them, and then of course you can buy additional add-ons or plugins to enhance the functionality of your store. Similar to when choosing a web host or the WooCommerce, the e-commerce solution. As always, when buying add-ons or whatever, make your homework, do a bit of homework, research a bit the vendor, and make sure you you always buy from reliable sources. So I think that's basically. So we've set up the e-commerce store, or at least we've chosen a web host, we've chosen the e-commerce store, we've set up WordPress, and we're just kind of getting started. I think the next step basically is, before we even jump into like configuring and the security of the store, this can be additional, but it depends on where you are and what you intend to do, but many e-commerce stores use third-party services, like for newsletters, for emails, and for data, for payments. I think it's very important that when choosing such services, it's very important to go for something. Again, it really depends on the laws of the region where you live or where you intend to sell. But that's also very important because, like for example, I know there are differences between certain mail list providers and stuff. Like, make sure you always choose, read. I know it's a bit of, especially in the early days, a bit boring, like to read privacy policies and these type of terms and stuff. I think the easiest way is always to ask the support. It's also like, in my opinion, usually when we do it ourselves, when we are evaluating a service, we like to ask support because it shows you roughly how good they are in terms of support. And customer support, I think, Joel, normally e-commerce is something 24/7, especially. So
exactly.
If something goes wrong with your mailing list or your checkout is not working, of course you need instant support. So it's good to choose reliable services. So so you're looking for emails, mailing lists, and all these type of services, analytics, and all this stuff. Make sure at least you check, that they comply. The services you're using comply with the compliance regulations or legislature that is in your region or where you're trying to sell. I think that goes as well with payments. Then it depends on the scale of your e-commerce store, but if you're just starting, most probably you don't have you shouldn't be worrying or hassling or developing something to handle sensitive payment data. There are a lot of services, PayPal, Stripe, Molly. I think even, if I'm mistaken, Joel, even some modern banks like Revolut are providing some for subscriptions and stuff like that. So choose a reliable third-party payment gateway. And nowadays, as we've seen, even banks are offering these type of things like renewals and stuff. And make sure, of course, again, look at regulations in your region and where you're selling. That's kind of you can use them in your region. I think, in my opinion, especially if you're just getting started, the last thing you want to do is develop a custom system or hassle with storing sensitive financial data. At least when you use third-party like Stripe or PayPal or Money, you are only on your e-commerce store. If you're using Easy Digital Downloads or WooCommerce, you're only storing the customer, the address, the email address, the physical address, if they need shipping, and username and stuff like that. But at least if you have subscriptions, renewals, and anything like that, where the payment details are stored, the credit card number or the PayPal account and stuff like that, at least they are stored on a much bigger and reliable solution like Stripe, PayPal, and stuff like that. And of course, no one is 100% secure, but if something happens there, it's a very different story because, of course, they have much more resources when it comes to monitoring their service and making sure they keep it secure. I think so. Kind of we are, in terms of services, we are covered, right, Joel? Anything else you would add? So you set up, you chose the hosting, you chose your plugin that you want for e-commerce, maybe some add-ons, services for emails and analytics and stuff like that. Payment gateways, anything else you would add typically?
We briefly mentioned having a TLS certificate,
Yes.
so maybe it's worth expanding a little bit more on that. Something worth mentioning, since we spoke about how to go about choosing a hosting service provider, is that some hosting providers do provide an easy way for you to add a TLS certificate. Although it shouldn't be the sort of deciding factor when it comes to choosing a service provider, do look into it, especially if you don't have any experience with installing a TLS certificate. And like most people refer to it as SSL, keep it in mind, but SSL is no longer in use. Now we use TLS.
Exactly. Yeah. By the way, nowadays there is Let's Encrypt, which is a like certificate authority. So more certificates are free in general. However, of course, it really depends. But there are different. I think in one of our previous talks about WordPress security, we discussed this. There are different types of securities like EV, extended
Yeah.
validation and stuff. Yeah, you can. I think we might also have an article on our website about this. You can. Yeah, like but the free usually like in most cases is good enough. But yeah, like you might want to get other options. We have the first question. And Jay, thank you for your question. Like, are there any plugins for adding TLS to your site? I think, as Joel is saying, most web hosts nowadays, like, especially if it's managed WordPress hosting, everything is set up right away almost, like, so you don't have to do it. But yeah, if not, if you have your own dedicated server hosting or something like that, and you're setting up WordPress yourself, I think there's one really simple SSL or something like that. What was it?
It was renamed recently, but if you search for really simple SSL, you'll find it. But yes, that's one plugin that can help you add a TLS certificate to your website.
Good. So yeah, so now we're sorted in terms of setting up, and now of course it's about securing the setup. So I think we can start by the most basics, user roles. I think both WooCommerce and Easy Digital Downloads, in fact, create roles right out of the box. They have like the shop manager, customer, and different ones, which are very important because, of course, you don't want to give a customer, someone who purchased something, the same access as an editor, for example, or a store manager. That's why there are roles. In fact, usually, especially when it comes to e-commerce solutions, like the team, your team who manages the store usually logs into the backend of WordPress, but most customers usually have some sort of front-end interface where they can see their billing details, contact data, and stuff like that. And when it comes to roles, like most, like Easy Digital Downloads and WooCommerce have their own custom roles, but of course, you can use. It seems like Joel got disconnected. Let's see. Maybe we'll wait. Anyway, he'll join us. Hopefully very soon.
Yeah.
Hello, Joel.
Yeah.
It seems like we got
Yeah,
disconnected.
for a second there, yeah.
It's fine. Anyway, so yeah, we're saying that roles. So yeah, you need to use roles because, of course, like the customers have different access to your website than of course the people who manage your store. Your team, of course, have access to the backend, where they process orders, add new products, change the products and stuff like that. However, customers typically have access to a custom front-end web interface where they can see their billing details, orders, and stuff like that. In most cases, like it depends, of course, what you need. Most probably the roles that these plugins come in with are enough for most cases. But if you need custom roles, you can always use a plugin like Melapress Role Editor, which is our latest plugin, which you can use to create custom roles with custom capabilities and stuff like that. So yeah, so now we've taken care of the roles. Yeah, next part, I think we use a security, Joel, 2FA. What do you think? Authentication?
Yeah, yeah.
At least the team. You want to listen a bit more, like why it's important?
Yeah, we can start with authentication. So first is having a password policy. Passwords are very, very important. They're sort of the first sort of point of contact. So we should be looking at password length, password complexity, so having a mix of upper and lowercase characters, special characters, numbers, alphanumeric numbers, Very, very important. And on the same vein, making sure that passwords are replaced every so often, and avoiding using old passwords, which is called password recycling. Of course, it's very difficult to make sure that users are using unique passwords on your WordPress website than they are on other websites. This is a big problem, but through forcing users to change their password every so often, for example, every month, we can limit the risk of them using the same password as they do on their websites.
Exactly. I think it's important to point out, because many people might say, many e-commerce, we see it a lot, like, oh, I don't want to enforce like password policies, make it more difficult for the customers. At this stage, I think it's important to point out, we're talking about the team. Like the customers will come, we'll look into them later, like the people who have access to process orders, to customer payment data, and stuff like that. So,
Exactly. So at this point, we're talking about the users who are your team, basically,
yeah, managing
not
this part.
customers.
Correct.
Exactly. So this basically takes care of the passwords. Now, obviously, we can send them an email and ask them to follow these steps and hope for the best, or else we can install a plugin. Like we do have our own called Melapress Login Security, which allows you to do all of these things, and you can set them either site-wide or per user role. So you can have different policies for different roles.
Exactly.
Then sorry, go ahead.
No, no, it's okay. Go ahead.
Then to complement, or rather to reinforce the security steps that we've done with securing our passwords, is introducing two-factor authentication. Two-factor authentication has become standard these days. Most websites and most services at least offer two-factor authentication, and some actually mandate it. It's become that important, and in a nutshell, what it does is basically, aside from your username and password, you need to authenticate in one more way, which is different than username and password. So, for example, one of the most common 2FA methods in use is using an authenticator app. Like there's Google Authenticator, Microsoft Authenticator, OT, there's many of them.
Or you get an email with a one-time code usually. Which is
Yeah, exactly. Or you can get an email with a link, or you can use a hardware key these days. Now there are passkeys as well. So there are quite a few different ways. It's just that the most common one is the app, basically.
Yeah.
But yes, there are many other ways.
I think.
Sorry. And what this ensures is basically that even if the password gets leaked, or whatever, something happens, without access to the physical phone or the email or the hardware key, the person will still not be able to log in. So if someone's trying to breach a website and they have access to a leaked password without access to the phone, they will still not be able to log in.
Good. Yeah, I think it's very important to point out some things, because many people, again, especially when it comes to passwords, they're like, oh, I don't want to, like, how can we remember all the different passwords? First of all, nowadays there are password managers, software like like 1Password, which is an online service, but there are also desktop software that you can use. Some of them are actually free as well. Basically you just have to remember one password, and then you can have as many different passwords as you want. Nowadays they all have like password generators, they have autocomplete, and all this stuff. So it's like using even like with things like 1Password, you can use it ourselves. Like you can use an online service like 1Password that basically shares all the you can have shared vaults. So like if you have services that you are sharing in between you, for example, it's not recommended to share the same credentials for the same service, of course, but if you have this store, I think it's very important. Apart from user roles, every user should have their own user. So then when it comes to logs, we'll talk about more about logs later. You know exactly who has done what and which change. So that is very important. But yeah, like some services, of course, like if it's just like one-off service where you just have one username, you can have 1Password and share that vault basically, so everyone can access the credentials of certain services. So that is very important. So yeah, I think nowadays there is no excuse anymore, like for using quick passwords or for not having 2FA. I mean, like again, like some store owners, I've seen I've seen it in emails, not just in general, even on forums and stuff like, oh, maybe it's too much, it stops productivity and stuff like. Listen, I think nowadays everyone has, not everyone, but the majority of people have LinkedIn, have Facebook, have Instagram, use Google, Gmail and stuff. They all nowadays require you to use 2FA. All the online bankings, they all have some sort of two-factor authentication. So if you are working for any e-commerce store, at least you have some technical knowledge, some basic technical abilities, and you can definitely configure 2FA and use some sort of password manager. So like weak passwords or not using 2FA, like it's no longer kind of like excusable nowadays, even though unfortunately, as we've seen from most reports about 2024, weak passwords and stuff like that are still like the number one or number two most common issues when it comes to hacked websites or hacked services. So yeah, that's very important. In fact, so we discussed, using user roles. Every user should have their own user on your website. 2FA authentication. Sorry. And also 2FA. And the next step, activity logs. We have a plugin called WP Activity Log. I think it's more about, first of all, it's about compliance, right, Joel?
Yeah. So one thing before we move on, maybe it's worth mentioning password policies for customers.
Yes, definitely.
So as I mentioned earlier, you can have different policies for different roles. So whilst we might want to have strict policies for our users who are on our team, we can still have a policy for our customers, but that's less strict, so to speak. So for example, we can just enforce the password length and the complexity. This is this is common these days. A lot of web stores have some sort of password complexity requirement.
Yes, exactly.
And as such, it's not such a big deal. Ultimately, people are beginning to understand the importance of security when online, so should be fine.
Exactly. Also, I think it's becoming maybe even more common. Like 2FA, it's not an excuse to use a weak password, but still, nowadays, you can see when you register to a service, they enable 2FA automatically for you, as in each time you try to log in, they will send you a code via email, and
Exactly.
So this is becoming really common. In fact, it's something we'll be including in the next update of W2FA, something where you can enforce users whenever a user with a specific role registers to your website, you automatically enable email 2FA basically, and they get a one-time code over email. So we discussed the customers, and of course, it really depends. I think it also really depends on the type of clientele that you have, because if they don't necessarily store any particular data I'm not saying you should have lenient policies, but of course, customers, if they have their own portal, they can access all their data, they have their actual house address and stuff like that. Of course, it's also for the security and safety of the customer themselves to enforce some policies. Otherwise, if their accounts get hacked, at the end of the day, they're also the ones who can become a victim of these issues. Talking about now that the next step, as we're going to say, activity logs. So basically, yes, we're saying we have a plugin called WP Activity Log. Logs, it's it has a number. It helps with a number, as in user accountability for your team. Basically, it's not about Big Brother or stuff like that. It's just it's important to have some sort of user accountability. First of all, everyone makes mistakes, so you need to find out, okay, what happened with the stock when and stuff. It's easy to find out. But also, I think there are compliance bodies like what we mentioned before, like GDPR, PCI-DSS, the California one, a few other ones around the world. I don't think there's a compliance body that deals with e-commerce that doesn't require you to have some sort of logic, right, Joe? To keep a record of who accessed
is what.
Yeah, who from your team accessed which customer, which of their orders and stuff like that.
Exactly, which data, sure.
It became a legal requirement nowadays. I mean, you cannot go without it. So it has to be done. It's also, by the way, it's good for similar to anything else, customer safety, customer security, but also for your own business as well, some sort of accountability, some sort of logs to know exactly what happened. So that is very important. So I think in terms of setting up like the first, like you chose the web host, you chose the e-commerce solution you want to use, you chose the add-ons, you've built everything up. So that is your store setup, the SSL and TLS certificate. You chose which services you'd like to use for emails and stuff. Payment gateways, highly recommended. Again, like don't try to develop your own payment gateway unless you specialize in that business, of course. But no, it's definitely might as well going for third parties like PayPal, Stripe, Molly, Revolut, and other like modern type of solutions. This is like the setup of your store. Once you have that one, user roles, login and security policies, password policies, 2FA. Always go. You mentioned this a couple of times, Joel, in previous. Can you explain it again? Like what you always should go for when it comes to roles, to the principle of least privileges. Can you explain it again?
Yes.
Yeah.
So if you've seen any of our other live Q&A, this is something that we mention pretty much every time. Basically, the principle of least privilege tells us that each user should have the capabilities to do their job, and that's it, no more, no less. So basically, it's the least amount of privileges possible for them to do their job. And this basically is low. It is not a question of trust, but it is a question of risk reduction.
Exactly. Yeah.
Very, very important. And even if there's if an account is breached, for example, then we don't want to give the person access to things that they shouldn't have had,
Exactly.
So,
you always try to contain, even if in case of attack.
Exactly.
Hopefully it never happens, but in case of attack, you're always containing as much as you can, like the issue with these things.
Exactly. And that's the thing with security. Like, it's not just about installing a plugin and that's it. You need to put as many things as possible to try and stop if someone is trying to breach a website. You need to put sort of a number of hurdles along the way to try and stop them at every step.
Exactly.
Rather than have one hurdle and then once they're in.
Exactly. Very good. So we've done that one, roles and stuff, capabilities, login security, password policies and stuff like that. 2FA, especially your team, it's definitely very important. And we also discussed activity logs. So now you're kind of like set up and ready to run. I think it's not necessary, but nowadays it's definitely recommended some sort of firewall, CDN, or some sort of like protection, especially if it's in a commerce store. And then, of course, on top of that, we have this is not specifically e-commerce, like generic website and software and WordPress security, basically. All software should be kept up to date.
At all times.
WordPress plugins, WordPress, if you have your own dedicated server, the OS, the web server, everything, literally everything, even the operating system on your computer that you use, your mobile and everything. Ideally, you should always use the latest version, unless you have a very specific reason, which again, like you should try to work around that, but always use the latest version of the software that you use. Remove any unused, especially on the website, remove any unused. We see it a lot, like websites with tens of plugins and half of them are deactivated. Like, why are they like old versions of plugins? Like, I will no longer use that. Like, remove them. Even just for the less, sorry for that, the less clutter you have on your website, the easier it is, not just from the security point of view, even if you have a technical problem, the easier it is to troubleshoot some things. So any unused plugins, themes, I think even on your mobile and stuff, no Joe, like any app.
Exactly. As in with the plugins, you can take a backup of the plugins by logging in through SFTP. Go to the plugin folder. So if you are worried that you might need it, take a backup of it and remove it. But then if you need it, then at least it is there.
I think nowadays,
But yeah, as you were saying, even on the phone, if there's an app you are not using, delete it. Because every app you install is basically extending your attack surface.
Exactly. And anyway, nowadays, especially with websites, if you're not sure, go on the staging, delete the plugin, run some tests, make sure everything is still working correctly.
Exactly.
And then remove it. So yeah, so we talk, keep your software up to date, remove any unused software, especially on the website, plugins, themes, and stuff like that. Backups, I can't stress enough like how important backups are. Not just backups, make sure your backups work so occasionally, from time to time, set a reminder.
Test restore.
Exactly, test restore, and not just restore it, restore, like access the staging website you've set up, just to make sure that everything is set up correctly.
Yeah.
And I think like the last thing, yeah, security best practices, of course, check the logs, scan your website from time to time. There are a lot of services like WP Scan and similar ones, or if you're using a security software or security service, usually like some web or stuff, they will tell you if you have outdated plugins or some plugins needs updated and stuff like that. I think, and the last, which is it's not always mentioned, but it's, especially nowadays, there are always changing the e-commerce regulations and laws. So I know it's kind of like the least exciting part, but keep an eye on the news and stay up to date with what's happening, because the last thing you want is you have a small business you're starting up, and to get fined for something that might have been just an oversight rather than you doing it intentionally. No, especially nowadays, Joe, like when it comes to privacy, I don't know, all this stuff, it's quite important, right?
Yeah. And it's equally important to share that information with your team members.
Exactly. Yeah. In fact, once you're mentioning this is very important, because earlier we also mentioned, like using password managers and stuff like that. I think training your team, especially, is very important. Keeping them up to date. Making them aware what are password managers, making sure they are using them. And I mean, there are a lot of. You don't necessarily need courses. I mean, there are courses specifically tailored for employees and stuff like people definitely need, especially if they're coming, I don't know, from marketing or other backgrounds, which they don't necessarily have a technical background. They might not be aware of the type of attacks that are happening nowadays. So it's very good, like, to keep your team always updated, like, what's happening, like the basic guidelines, I would say. Joel, what do you think? Like, train,
Yeah. So look at, for example, we're seeing phishing attempts evolving a lot now with AI, very, very personalized. It's no longer some prince in whatever country. They're very, very personalized, very easy to fool you. So it's important, like, for example, if you've come across this piece of news, to share it with your users. Like, listen, this is happening. So if you receive an email from someone you don't know, make sure that you pay extra attention.
Exactly. Yeah. I think, by the way, it can happen to the best of us. I was just reading some news just a few weeks ago. There's this security influencer, Troy Hunt. He's been in the application security business for years. I've known him personally. I've worked with him a couple of times. He is genuinely one of the best, and he's always like focused on these things. And just a few weeks ago, he was a victim of a phishing attack, and someone like grabbed the list of his Mailchimp subscribers. So even he fell for a phishing attack. This is not about pointing fingers. What I'm saying is, like, it can happen to the best of us, and he is generally, based on my opinion, he's one of the best out there. So if he can fall for these things, people who have much less exposure and much less experience are even way more vulnerable to these type of attacks, susceptible to these type of attacks. So I think it's very important to keep your team always up to date. And if you have yourself some security background, keep them up to date. If not, try to find someone who maybe can give them like a bit of basic training, give them some best practices every so often and stuff like that.
Exactly.
I think that's it, right, Joel? So
that's pretty much it.
Choosing the right plugin, it's always the same as like choosing the right plugin is very important. Getting SSL/TLS, choosing the right web host, choosing the right services, third-party services, emails, mailing lists, payments, PayPal, and stuff like that. And then, of course, when it comes to setting up the store, user roles, login and password policies, authentication, 2FA, some sort of logging, especially for compliance reasons and stuff like that. And if you can, of course, like always, backup, remove unused plugins, and ideally go for some sort of firewall and CDN solution, right?
Yeah, it's worth mentioning. We do have an article on our website.
Okay.
It was published very recently, how to secure your online store, and it covers all of this in detail.
Good. Most probably we'll link to it in the description.
Yeah. Good. Imagine.
Yeah. Thanks a lot. Thanks, everyone. Don't forget to like and subscribe to this channel so you are always notified when there are new sessions. And I'll be seeing you on Thursday in 2 days with Aurelio. Thanks, everyone. Thanks for watching.
Thank you.
Thanks. Bye-bye.